Well, good day, good evening, good morning, everyone who would be watching us in recording or to those who are watching us live because we are worldwide. And this is EastCalling with you. I'm Yelena, and our favorite guest, Larry Johnson, and my colleague, Brian Milton, is also here. And we are here, to talk about peace, prosperity, and cooperation. This is what we all must strive for. Every day we're challenged as colleagues, as friends, as siblings, as parents, and as family, as a humanity. And let us seek for the truth because you have a chance too. It's your choice. So let us start our today's show. And today, again, I think it's everyone's, not favorite, but most discussed topic. It's Iran, of course, because there are so many things going on around it that I literally stopped understanding what is going on. Say yesterday's and today's also speculations that Trump is as if he is negotiating with somebody from Iran who is of the high ranking uh, authorities, but it's not Khamenei himself. So the signals are very controversial, to say the least. And personally, I don't understand what is going on now. Would you, Larry, please explain?
Donald Trump has imaginary friends. He's like uh, he's like that. The kid in the movie where he said, "I see dead people." Yeah, that's Donald Trump. Uh, he didn't. There's no negotiations with Iran. Iran doesn't have a thing to say to the United States now, other than get the hell out of the Middle East, get the hell out of the Gulf, and if you don't, we'll make you. I mean, that's where it's at right now. And what Trump was doing yesterday was trying to set up another sucker punch for Iran, because he said, "Well, I've ordered a 5-day pause." Well, that 5-day pause basically coincides with the arrival of the Marine Expeditionary Unit. It's showing up, and what's important about that is it's called the 31st MEU. It was ordered into action, ordered to deploy on March 13th. Well, starting on March 12th, we've seen a dramatic surge of C-17 uh, aircraft. These haul troops and or large items like helicopters, and I think they can even haul a tank. They they started flying to a variety of different bases that are known to hold special operations forces. So they're flying out of Fort Bragg. They're flying out of Joint Base Lewis McChord out in Washington. That's the home of the 75th Rangers. They're flying out of Fort Campbell, which is home of the Task Force 160, known as the Night Stalkers. So it appears that what what the military is doing is they're using the Marines as a deception or as a distraction, because sending two MEUs sounds like a lot, but there's really no way they could practically be employed in the Persian Gulf without getting sunk. The ships they look like aircraft carriers, and they they'd be big, fat, juicy targets for the Iranians. But they're moving them into theater. There's another one, the 11th, that comes out of San Diego, Camp Pendleton, California. So it left earlier this week. Normally, it would take a route down through the Panama Canal, across the Atlantic, through the Med, down the Red Sea. But let's say it's a more dangerous route now. So they actually due west, which initially I thought, well, that would have been the way to go. It would have been quicker. No, it's not. It's actually longer.
But
So
the Houthis stepped in and said they will interdict in the Red Sea, right?
yes, yeah. No, we haven't seen any action yet by the Houthis, but they vowed that they would do that. So it looks like, and then a couple of other clues. Donald Trump, he was supposed to attend CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee conference this weekend. He's canceled. He was supposed to make a guest appearance at a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago on Friday. He's no longer available for that. So something's going to happen Friday, Saturday, Sunday over the weekend. It's going to involve putting U.S. troops into Iran. I don't know if they're going to try to seize Karg Island. That would be the most insane move if they try. Because, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the Iranians let them land on Karg. Once you got them on Karg, then you just start chewing them up, hitting them with drones and missiles.
Can I interrupt you on that,
Yeah.
Larry? Others have said maybe Keshem Island, if that's how you say it. I don't know. Chabahar Bay, because it doesn't make you go through the choke point. And there is a naval facility and an airport there, but it's not in Chabahar Bay, but it's not as densely populated as Keshem Island. Can you say anything about that?
Well, yeah, I saw the analysis suggesting this kid called History Legends.
Alex, I think. His name.
Yeah. Why take Chabahar? What does that get you? Oh, we're holding territory in Iran. Okay, you haven't done a thing to open the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
So putting troops at Chabahar is like, what's the point? Because once you put troops in there, then you got to sustain them. And Iran can then turn and launch missiles. How are they going to be sustained? You're going to bring either aircraft or ships in. So it just, it is, it's, if you will, the safest action, but it accomplishes nothing. Now, Keshem Island, again, it's one piece of territory, and getting troops on there will be difficult, and sustaining them there will be difficult. That entire shoreline around that point in the strait, it's 100 miles long. When you look, I wrote earlier, I guess late last week, comparing D-Day from June 6, 1944. Now, those four beaches, Sword, Juneau, Omaha, Utah, that covered an area of about 50 miles long, north to south. And we used 165,000 troops to try to hold that stretch, and had some difficulty with it. And now we're going to put in a force that, maybe total could be upwards around 20,000 on this little island. And then how do they get resupplied? The Iranians have missiles, drones. They don't just have to stay there on the coast. There are mountains behind them, and that's easy to conceal both drone launch sites, missile launch sites. So this is one of those things that we're going to do it. It'll make us feel good, and then when it comes time to try to hold it, it's going to end up being a war of attrition with U.S. Special Operations Forces dying. This is, if they go for, they could very well, I think they're going to do it. I'm not sure if Keshem is it, or maybe an alternative is they're going to try to seize nuclear material from an Iranian storage site. That's another possibility.
Also, you have Newt Gingrich is talking about, bypassing it altogether with using so-called PNEs to just build a new, cut a new path somewhere else. Have you heard about his idea on this?
No. What's a PNE?
Peaceful nuclear explosions, to literally cut a new channel. And he's been promoting this lately. I saw him on X talking about cutting some, but and then I think Benjamin Netanyahu said, "Oh well, we can just run pipes across Saudi Arabia." It seems like people are saying these things with no expecting that we're just going to accept those as legitimate ideas, when these things are extremely difficult under conditions where the Iranians are really dominating the whole countryside, from what I've seen in the GCC states with ballistic missiles. How do you build anything?
Yeah. Well, in fact, the infrastructure for particularly the UAE and Qatar is being destroyed. I don't see, frankly, I don't see how those, let's call them dictatorships of families, survive. The economic activity that put money in the pockets of the Emiratis consisted of the flow of oil being exported out. I think some liquid natural gas. Then trade, so that the flow of oil was like 25% of their income. The other 58% comes from international trade. They've got a free trade zone called Jebel Ali that is, if it's not the largest, it's the second largest in the world. A lot of products would flow through there. It means it's a big money laundering center. Well, it's no ships going through the strait, so it's shut down. There's zero activity at Jebel Ali. The international, it was Dubai became sort of a center for international financial and investment activity. That's shut down. People aren't flocking there to say, oh, let's invest in Dubai right now. Are you kidding? International tourism, that's dried up. Go ahead.
No, Yelena, I have a thing there on Dubai. Speaking of investing in Dubai, there's a news clipping there. It's really
which one exactly?
It's the one with between Wilkerson and the U.S. government one.
OnlyFans.
Yeah. See, I think Dubai is really in trouble, actually, Larry, because OnlyFans was, really run from there. All those poor working women are now out of work. What's going to happen to Dubai?
Yeah. Dubai became sort of, I call it an adult Disneyland, and the stereotype of these conservative Muslim regimes. Good Lord, Dubai was not that. It was like Las Vegas on steroids, but that the party's over there, and Iran has effectively Iran has shut it down. So I don't think they're coming back. They're gonna this particularly because this war is even if there's some dramatic U.S. special operations move this weekend, I don't think that's going to bring an end to the war. I guess I am very concerned about what is apparently getting ready to happen, and I can only assume that if I could see this with open source and not having my own intelligence collection assets, I would imagine that the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians have a pretty good idea what to expect and have prepared countermeasures. And so the idea that I think Trump wants to do a repeat of Venezuela, not realizing Venezuela was a complete inside job done with cooperation of members of Maduro's own security team. You don't have that now in Iran, not at all.
And in terms of Venezuela, as long as you mentioned it, now there were some reports last week that there is some activity ongoing on Cuba. So what is to expect in that region? Because Trump might actually switch attention, as he loves doing, from Iranian case to Cuba and present it as some kind of win.
Well, you see, and this is the problem with Cuba. Apart from cigars, sugarcane, and bananas, Cuba doesn't have any natural resources. So, if the United States goes in there and tries to take control of it, all right, you got a lot of hungry mouths to feed. I don't see it. It doesn't gain the United States anything strategically, other than it's like grabbing another dependent child. Go ahead.
I was just thinking it could be used as to distract public attention and present himself as if he has some success somewhere. And also, as far as I understand, Marco Rubio has something very personal against Cuba and its people in general.
Yeah, but that's just, it's such a, the Cuban, they're big in Miami, but there's such a narrow slice of the American electorate. But what's really got people's attention are the rising gas prices. The price of a gallon of gasoline has gone up in $1.10 in 4 weeks. So that's that's more than a 30% rise, and it looks like it's not going to continue. What Trump did yesterday when he made the announcement, oh, we've had great talks, or we're almost near a deal. He did that at 7:30 in the morning, 7:29. And immediately, just right before he made that announcement, man, there were some big movements in the oil futures contracts. People knew what was coming. And what he did was deliberately manipulate the market. I wouldn't be surprised if some of his friends and family made some enormous profits off of that move, because he temporarily convinced the oil market that, oh, the price is going to come down. So the price of oil started dropping on the international oil market. The Brent came down a little bit. Then as well, it looked like the price of gold and silver fell. So he was downplaying any chance that this was going to get worse. Well, it was a lie. It was a complete manipulation. So, the economic reality of what has happened and what's happening in the Gulf right now is we're only starting to see the effects. The first countries to be hit and hurt by this are in Asia: Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Philippines. Philippines has now declared a state of emergency. Australia is looking at significant fuel shortages. So this is going to percolate down throughout the globe. And even though the United States doesn't get hardly gets any oil out of the Persian Gulf, but it did get fertilizer. And the fertilizer crisis is the one, it is not as apparent like, when you go to fill up your tank of gas and you say, oh my God, I'm paying, $1 more. But it's probably more serious than the gas shortage, because the price, one, you've had the loss of 1/3 of the annual fertilizer production. It's gone now. It's not coming out of the Persian Gulf, and no, it doesn't look like there's a solution anytime soon to turn that back on. And right now it's the planting season in the northern hemisphere. So this means the odds are extremely high that 8 months from now, a year from now, we're going to be looking at a food crisis. There's not going to be enough food because they weren't able to grow it. And that'll affect different countries in different ways, but it's going to add to this whole sense of chaos and disorder in the globe. And go ahead.
No, I was just willing to make a point that yesterday it was on the news that Goldman called the current situation with oil the largest supply shock in history. So it's not like oil price crisis; it's supply shock. This is what is actually happening. And Alexander Novak on March 18th announced that the largest energy crisis in the world in the last 40 years. So we're really heading to a world disaster, I would say.
Well, we're in unknown territory. I mean, this is something that really has never happened in modern times. Back in 1973, during the Arab oil embargo, they just stopped selling to the West. And they said, "Oh no, we're not going to sell to you." They didn't stop producing. So the production infrastructure was still intact. They were just mad at the United States for its blind support of Israel. Well, now you've got actual destruction of the systems of production. And I don't. Have you had a Stas on your show, Stanislav Krapivnik?
Me too.
Yeah. So Stas.
We actually talked with Stas. So well, now I think we are going to meet next week, hopefully.
Yeah. So talk to him about his time working with Halliburton, working in the Caucasus and the oil projects, because he can give you the rundown on exactly how long it takes to get some of this stuff back up and running. It's not even a matter of weeks; it could be months, and that's assuming that hey, we stop it now, everybody's cool, back put your guns down, back away from the table, but that's not happening. Iran is in a uniquely strong position, and I just saw that they now are making more money out of sales of oil now than they did before, because before they used to the payments went through Dubai. Well, they've now got a payment mechanism. I think it's going through China.
The yuan.
So that's number one. Number two, before they were essentially selling their oil at like $55 a barrel. Now they're getting $100 a barrel. So, and their production has actually gone up. And this is the other thing that if the United States takes Karg Island, what's the purpose? If they say, well, we want to get control of Iran's oil. Okay, if that's your purpose, then Iran will destroy its oil field there. They're not going to let you have it. And the desperation of the West to secure the supply of oil is evidenced by the fact that in the course of the last week, Scott Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, has removed the sanctions from both Russia and Iran. Why? Well, we got to get that oil that's out there on the high seas. We got to get it into the system. Because he understands that if they don't do that, then the price of oil is, regardless of what they do, the price of oil is going to continue to skyrocket. You've lost 20% of the supply, and it's not coming back anytime soon. And it's not like there's, they say, well, Venezuela, we just pumped that out. Sorry, Venezuela's got all this oil in the ground, but the mechanisms for taking it out of the ground and getting it onto ships for refining that's broken. That's one of the things that needs to be repaired. It's going to cost millions of dollars, and nobody stepped up to do that yet. So we're really at a crisis, both with respect to oil, liquid natural gas, and fertilizer.
Yelena, put up the one that says U.S. government, because since you mentioned Scott Bessent, Fortune magazine had a commentary that the Treasury has also just declared the U.S. to be essentially insolvent. They said it's not hyperbole. It's the conclusion drawn directly from the Treasury Department's own consolidated financial systems for the fiscal year 2025, released last week. They said it's 6.06 trillion in total assets against 47.78 trillion in total liabilities as of September 2025. And that does not include off-balance sheets, but I mean, they actually, off-balance sheet iceberg. This does not include Social Security or anything like that. So, you're talking about physical production, which is directly tied to the physical maintenance of human beings, but the financial system now is also on the United States.
Right. Yeah, no, it's just we added in the last year about another $1 trillion to our debt. So when Trump came in, I thought they were talking like 36 trillion, and now it's like they're talking 39 trillion. So that's $3 trillion. The United States got away with this in the past as long as the petrodollar was the king of currency, that if you're going to buy oil, you had to use the dollar, and all these different foreign governments were buying up U.S. treasuries. Now, when they're in a financial crisis, they're going to start selling U.S. treasuries in order to raise cash. And, we're on the cusp, I believe, of a massive financial crisis. We keep, trying to put Band-Aids on it and pretend that it's okay. Just, keep spending, folks. But we're going into stagflation. They define recession as a technical term. It's certain period. I think it's like a year or 6 months where you're below a certain level of production, or negative economic growth, and a depression is where the economic activity has fallen 10%. So we're in. I would argue we're in stagflation right now, and stagflation means declining. The economy stopped growing, and the prices are rising. It's just the economists haven't they haven't caught up with the numbers yet to be able to say, oh yeah, this started in February of 2026. So it may be a little while before the actual acknowledgement of how we're in deep kimchi will dawn upon people.
Yeah, because now I have recently read, I think a couple of weeks ago, it's regarding Germany, but I think it can be applied anywhere, that actual industrial production has declined significantly, and any only sector that keeps economy afloat is just trade. For now, people still buy something. But I remember the shock in 2022 when people actually stopped buying and everyone was like not quite understanding what's going on. Then people adapted somehow, because like when my previous boss said, well, people are like that, they will adapt in half a year, in a year they will adapt, everything will go as it went. But I think now in this changing reality, well, adapt to what? This is the question. So how we're going to, I don't know, maybe this is this perfect storm that some economists were awaiting, that will destroy I would say unnecessary constructions over the economy, like financial market. And understand me correctly, I do believe that some financial instruments are really necessary, but now what we're dealing with, it's over sophisticated system which actually strangles the real economy, and we somehow have to get rid of that. Maybe it's our chance. Who knows?
Well, there's another factor here to consider. What is life like in the various societies in terms of, like in the United States? We have a problem with substance abuse, beyond just alcoholism and addicted to narcotics, and you've got entire, it's not the entire cities, but you go into like Philadelphia and Baltimore and Los Angeles, and there are parts of the city that are just a living hellscape, and people's like zombies bent over. The number of people that are getting married and having children, that's declined. So you really have a breakup of normal families. I've seen it. I've seen it in my family with some of my my nieces and nephews. Some of the life choices they're making. Just one in particular, she's had children by 3 different men, not married to any of them, and the current guy she's with has been beating the hell out of her. And we're talking now, she's a 40-year-old woman. We're not talking some 18-year-old. So when the fabric of your society starts to come apart, and I would argue one of the things that destroys the societies really is, let's call it the absence of religion. That's one of the differences I see in Russia. There is a genuine faith and a devotion to Orthodox Christianity. Now, and they managed to balance that with while they are an Orthodox Christian country predominantly, they do not exclude or make the Muslims or the Hindus or the Buddhists feel outside. And, I've seen that with, particular with General Abdi Aludinov. General Aludinov, he's a devout Muslim, but he is a fierce Russian patriot. But also the same within the Muslim community, like the Orthodox Christian community, is this devotion to certain fundamental values. And that provides a strength for the society. That's what's, you don't have that in Western Europe. And you certainly really don't have that here in the United States. I mean, it's under attack.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is sort of a backstory. We like to say, oh, our troops are moving. We got SEAL Team 6, we got Delta Force, and they got some very talented people there. But it doesn't answer the question about really what are they fighting for?
That was going to be that. I keep coming back to that in my own thinking, Larry, because power to destroy. You talk to our friend Scott Ritter. I mean, he's made it very clear. Our military, Marines, and various other operations have an incredible power to destroy. But as a nation, we don't have the power to create right now.
Yeah.
And I've been looking again back at the Vietnam War from 65 to 68. I mean, we conducted sustained bombing campaigns against North Vietnam. We destroyed everything, but Ho Chi Minh, who had quoted from Thomas Jefferson, he quoted the U.S. Declaration of Independence in opposition to the French, and then the American, what he saw as imperial, and then General Giap, who was one of not a military man by training, but the key military thinker there. He said there's something that the Americans are missing in terms of national development, is why we are going to fight all the way to the very end.
Yeah, yeah. No, we just we've gotten into fights without having a clear objective in terms of what we're trying to achieve. We think we can just throw military force at it and that'll take care of it. And you're right to use the example of the failure of our bombing campaign against the North Vietnamese. And I drew the same parallel with Japan. So Ryan is probably, when you went to school, let's call it high school, middle school, the way the narrative was presented about World War II is that because we dropped the atomic bomb, that's what forced Japan to surrender.
Sure.
That's the narrative. So we see, bombing, boy, this magic solution. Well, it's simply not true. And I went back and looked at the final year of the war in the Pacific. And the United States conducted a massive bombing campaign against Japan that started in March of 1945, killed the conventional bombs alone killed well over 500,000 Japanese civilians. One bombing raid in Tokyo, a firebombing, killed 100,000. And then with the combination of the bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, an additional 200,000 Japanese civilians died. Yet the government, the war ministry, they were still talking, even after the second atomic bomb. They weren't ready to give up, but until Russia, the Soviet Red Army, fulfilling a promise made to Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the previous summit in Russia. They came, they invaded in Manchuria. They destroyed a Japanese army, and that's really what led the Japanese to surrender. The point being that we think that we can drop all this bomb and hit these guys with missiles and they'll give up. They're not. That's not going to happen. Not going to happen. And by the same token, Iran is hitting Israel repeatedly with missiles and such. It is they have a better chance of forcing Israel to change its policy simply because Israel's so small. With Iran, you got a country that's twice the size of Texas, and anybody you want to understand how big Texas is. I had two Honduran friends years ago, and they were trying to drive back to Honduras, so you get go through San Antonio and head down to Brownsville. Somehow they took the wrong road, and they were driving, instead of driving south, they were driving west, northwest
to El Paso.
Yeah, and they drove for like 6 or 7 hours before they realized they were going the wrong way. Yeah. And so that's how big Texas is, that you can, you can drive for hours. It just stretches out. So the bombing of Israel, where you take out just 2 cities, Haifa, Tel Aviv, that's 55% of the population of Israel right there. It's tough for them to sustain operations with that kind of damage, but still, it will be pressure. It's not going to force Israel to surrender, I don't believe, but it is going to dramatically affect the quality of life in Israel, and it's already creating some real unrest about. Some of the population is not able to get into air raid shelters, as an example. So what we have, though, here with Donald Trump is he has set the region on fire, and he doesn't have a fire extinguisher.
Right.
And what I'm also thinking about is actually upcoming refugee crisis. I think that refugees will start coming not from Israel only, and not only the people who are escaping Middle East. For now, these are bloggers and different kinds of crypto investors and so on, but ordinary people who are affected, I think after a while they will also start going. And well, in my opinion, where everyone goes is actually Europe, because Europe, in at least among the refugees, is seen as a land where they can get shelter and where they can get literally anything. So actually, me as living in Europe, I feel a little bit unsafe about even own safety, to be completely honest.
Well, let me ask you a question, Elena. Have you seen has the price of gasoline gone up now where you are?
Yes, and some places it's up to 30 kroner. It's like 2.6 euros, but in my area it's 28 kroner, so it's 2.4 euros.
And what was it, say, a month ago?
A month ago it was about 21 kroner or something.
Okay, so as the prices continue to rise, I mean, it's going to affect people's quality of life, and it's going to put more pressure on the governments. The conduct of the Europeans, to me, is just mystifying. That they cut off all contact with Russia, deprive themselves of cheap gas, cheap natural gas, and opt now they're basically dependent upon the United States, who's just going to bend them over a barrel and make them pay exorbitant prices. And what do you do?
That is actually, I don't even have the words to describe that. And the only, I think, 2 people who are trying to fight that is Orban and Syriato and
Fico.
Yeah, and Fico. And literally they are viewed as traitors by European Commission. This is what's strange. So they are, and some even claim that Orban is pro-Russian. He's not pro-Russian. He's pro-Hungarian. Actually, he's more pro-European than any other European politician who is now in charge. This is what really makes me wonder. And if Europe is now preparing to make war against Russia in 2030 or whatever, 2028. I don't know how they're going to manage that, but at least it would be smarter not to cut Russian gas off. If you want to fight Russia, then arm yourselves first and then cut everything off. But there seem to be, I don't know who is in charge in their planning, to be completely honest.
Well, the West, I keep hearing a concept about China that dominates Western thinking. And I keep trying to tell people they're crazy, but it is this, that the Chinese, they're not, you can't trust them, a bunch of yellow dinks. Yeah, I mean, it's very racist, but it's just like they don't have anything in common with Russia. So we need to peel off Russia so they're our friends, so that we work together against China. And I mean, it's the racism and hatred directed against China is, to me, it's off the charts. And so when I try to explain to people, I said, Russia and China now, they recognize they may look like the odd couple, but there's also that concept, opposites attract. And Russia and China now have recognized they are the future. There's nothing to be had. Sergei Karaganov's vision about Russia needs to look to the east, to Siberia, to China. It's coming fulfilled.
The other day, you and Larry Wilkerson were on a show.
It was either Nemo or Danny.
I think it was Danny. And actually, Yelena, maybe you can play the first 30 seconds.
Root what we're doing here. Donald Trump has no conception of what I'm going to say. Neither does Pete Hegseth. I don't think Vance does either, although Peter Thiel might have given him some insights. The people behind this administration, and they're not all Americans, the people behind the money, behind the American empire, want China taking down. That's what this real purpose of this war in Iran is for this country.
Is that what you...
That's why we're waging this war. I don't think the president knows that, but that's really...
Is that what you would say as well?
Yeah.
You were talking about the racism, because it seems like when you look at what China is doing around the world with their development, and I will also tell you, I'm planning on going to China next month, hopefully to see what it is China does inside China, to bring that back over here. It seems like that's the only plan that somebody is putting in front of Donald Trump. While he might be thinking it's Benjamin Netanyahu or something like that, that's not really what it is. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, you go back and you can look at Rand Corporation papers that were prepared by Rand for the Pentagon. This theme has been going on for quite a while, at least over the last 10 years. And the last one that was written was a paper by Aaron West Mitchell. He's a friend, buddies around with Eldridge Colby. Eldridge makes me realize how old I am, because I interacted with his grandfather, William Colby, back in the 1980s.
CIA director.
Yeah, he was the CIA director in 1978. He was, was it July 73, 74 when he took over? So he was there during, he gave up the family jewels. Anyway, they saw the war in Ukraine as a way to weaken Russia, that they envisioned a defeat of Russia by Ukraine with the backing of the West that would have then forced Russia to turn to the West as its savior. I didn't quite follow that logic, but that was what was written, and that therefore they would then unite to take on China. And this obsession with destroying China, I don't get it, because we say, oh, China, they're a communist country. Oh, China has not been going around the world invading other countries and killing the citizens of those countries. They've been competing economically, and are Chinese tourists sometimes obnoxious? Oh, yeah. Not that American tourists are always on their best behavior, or European tourists. Come on. So what China has created in the course of the last 50 years, because I go back 54 years now since China opened with Nixon's visit in 1972, is unbelievable. They've gone from a society that had a significant number of illiterate people, didn't know how to read or write, an agrarian society that was could barely feed itself, to now the unsurpassed industrial power of the world. The world has never seen anything like it. And, the United States is jealous. We used to be the ones on top. China has innovated in so many different areas that, and they're supposedly, the communists, and yet they don't spend massive portions of their wealth on building up a military industrial base. They don't do it. They're doing other things. Yeah, they're making money. Yeah, they're going out and securing supply chains. Yeah, they are showing that they are smart and thinking ahead so that they can try to preserve their society. China made a big mistake with its one-child policy back, in the 80s, late 70s. Once it got past that rigid communist ideology, they've wisened up, and they may have a demographic decline, but they're compensating for that by creating robots that can do the work that humans used to do.
So I have one other thing about that I was thinking. China has also taken arguably some of the most hostile people, the Saudis and the Iranians, and they've brokered a new relationship. Even prior to this, in 2023, I believe it was March, when they created. I don't know if it was a formal treaty, but it was certainly a thawing of the relationship between those two countries. So even in the Middle East, where we kind of posture around whatever, like the Abraham Accords, which was really about building hotels, the Chinese said, well, no, why don't we actually create a dialogue between nations? So in that regard, I think it was today, Professor Mearsheimer, because the question is, how do you wrap this thing up? How do you bring it to an end? He had said, well, maybe the Pakistanis, who have apparently, he says, have offered to mediate. I think McGregor had suggested Modi, because he's friendly with the Israelis, but also India is the leader of BRICS. That there are these possible people who could come in and say something. However, there's nothing that will happen other than Iran's ability to continue to exact the highest possible economic pain from the United States. So Can you address those ideas?
Yeah. Let me start, though, first with how the Chinese have a very, very different view of the world, of reality, than people who are raised in the West. People who've been raised in cultures dominated with Christianity, with this end of time, this view that there's an end of time, that Jesus is going to return, that there's this battle of Armageddon, and you find elements of that as well within Judaism. They're waiting for the return of the Messiah, and then within Islam as well. So the so-called three great religions have different perspectives on this end of times drama that's playing out. In China, you grow up you don't grow up understanding this. You're not exposed to it unless, just a very small segment of the Chinese that may be Christians. or Muslims, but the vast majority of the Chinese, they don't have a clue. I mean, they could listen to Westerners talk about that and just look at each other going, what the hell are they talking about? I mean, so I emphasize the point that this cultural difference, it shapes how you look at the world. It shapes how you approach problems, and it shapes how you achieve these solutions. So I don't think, I think India has actually done itself a lot of damage as a result of Modi's trip to Israel 3 days before the war started. And what is Modi's motivation? Modi hates Muslims. That's it. Simple. Particularly the Sunni variety. You can tolerate the Shia variety in Iran, but the Sunni variety, he's seen them as, and they've carried out terrorist attacks inside India, the significant ones. So Modi damaged himself as sort of a leader within BRICS. So I'm not sure he's got the clout to bring it together. But I think Iran now is at the stage, they're not going to negotiate at this point, or they're going to negotiate from a position of strength. The United States thinks, oh, we're going to tell them they got to get rid of their ballistic missiles. They're not getting rid of their ballistic missiles. They got to stop enriching uranium. No, we're going to continue enriching. We're going to do whatever the hell we want to do. We're an independent country.